Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Aga Wilson Show. I am really excited today because I have Brad, musician Brad, I would say, from Five Times August with me today, and we're gonna get into a lot of really interesting topics and conversations about the role of music and where our world is heading today. So, Brad, welcome to the show, and super excited to talk to you today.
Hi, Aga. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to thank you for being, such an inspiration during these hard times that we have experienced for the past 4 years, and you actually using your voice to not only speak up about things and the unjust things in the world, but also, for others that maybe did not have that voice or weren't able to speak up and stuff like that. So I guess. I would love to hear like your story and how all of this happened and how you came to this. I mean, obviously we've met in a lot of these conferences. You've been performing everywhere. Your music has inspired many people around the world, and I want to know how it all started.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. So I started Five Times August right after high school. I was freshly 18 years old. So I was just a kid. And I've always just written about what I knew I wanted to do music. And um I knew that was my path. I picked up a guitar when I was 11. I started writing my own songs when I was 14. And by the time I graduated, I just knew that's my path. And so that's the path I went down and really, you know, worked hard for a good 20 years prior to the COVID era. And I had a whole career behind me of touring the country and I had been to just about every state. Playing universities and college campuses. I had a lot of songs on um, TV and film and commercial, and music licensing was a big part of my career. And so, that's what I was doing for a really long time, writing breakup songs and writing love songs and just sort of being a pop songwriter. And that was sort of my lane. And I didn't rattle any cages. I had fans across a whole spectrum of people, and I had friends in the industry that covered the gamut from all different backgrounds, and it was a very unifying and behaved situation. Very, like I'm just right here in the middle of the road. Everybody's great, and perhaps a little naive and optimistic too about you know the, what my perspective on humanity was. And um and then I really, by the time, let's see, a few years prior to COVID, I was doing a kids music project because, as I said, I've always written about what's going on in my life, and so I'm a dad now. I'm a dad of three, and so I was doing the most pure, music that I could put out into the world, which was a kids family music project called the Juice Box Jukebox, and that's where my heart was. It was songs about kindness, being thankful, and very positive character building songs. And so it couldn't have been, further away from sort of where I ended up a year later as a protest singer songwriter calling out the government and stuff. But that's where I was just prior to COVID. And then throughout 2020, sort of this my perspective of what the world was started crashing down around me, where I had sort of this assumption that humanity had a certain baseline understanding of how we behaved and interacted and understood. You don't believe what you see on the TV, and maybe you don't trust politicians, and certain things that were just a given to me, kind of common sense. And then throughout 2020, I'm sort of looking around going like, oh, a lot more people are, you know, inclined to trust their TV than I thought, and inclined to believe what politicians are saying. And oh, we're really going along with things that don't make sense here. And while that was happening, I'm sitting there sort of thinking, where are number one, I'm like, where are all my music heroes? that used to speak out against stuff like this. And then number two, I'm watching this world going, I don't I don't want to leave this world behind, this version of the world behind for my kids. And so that really thrusted me forward. Once I was really thinking like, oh geez, in 10 years, my kids are going to go, that was crazy. What did you do, Dad? And so I felt the responsibility to step forward as a parent, as a musician, and to use my platform. And so I prayed on it, and didn't really know what to say. That's kind of how I ended up in this lane. I thought I have to say something. I have to get this off my chest. And I wrote a song called "God Help Us All," which was kind of a longer song, because I thought I'm just going to write this one song, get it off my chest, and release it to the world. And it ended up taking my career a whole other trajectory, because I was saying things in my music I hadn't said before, and things that my fans that were following me all those decades hadn't heard me say before. And I was being very honest and very raw, and it was just a song with me and acoustic guitar. It wasn't polished and or anything, and it was just this very raw song. And so two things happened simultaneously, which was I lost a lot of fans really fast, and then but then I started gaining new fans very fast as well. People that were discovering these songs that were speaking to them, that a lot of other artists were afraid to say. And so that encouraged me, because it let me know that I wasn't alone. And then I felt like I needed to keep going to let other people know that they weren't alone. And so that's how I sort of, in a nutshell, I ended up here. We're now going on 5 years since the beginning of COVID, and I'm in a whole other stratosphere of creating and mindset now, as an artist, as a dad, as just a person. And it changed me a lot, but a lot for the better, over the last couple of years. And here we are, so that's how we got here, kind of. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of us had that same, I mean, I recognize myself, same thing when I started my show, and that decision, and the, my meditations over it, and the prayers, and like, am I doing this or not? And the fear, of also going public. But I think
mhm,
most of us will say the same thing, that once you step into your truth and you really do what you feel is the right thing, we just
mhm,
everything opens up, right? The doors open up,
mhm,
and it just feels right, and you finally like step into your purpose,
mhm,
or
mhm,
the things that you love doing. So it is an
mhm,
incredible thing, and also comes with a lot of obviously challenges, right?
mhm. Yeah, it's a very lonely spot to be in when you take that step, and I certainly felt it. Not I would say to my wife, for the first, I don't even know, the first year that I was speaking out about this stuff, I was like, I'm either burning down everything I've ever worked for, or I'm building up something new. And I couldn't tell what I was doing, but I just felt called to do it. And I think that's where a lot of people came from. The consistent thread that I've found after traveling and meeting so many different folks on this side of the conversation the last couple of years, is that we were kind of live and let live people, and just leave me alone. And then the state of the world shoved us forward and gave us a calling to be there. And once I had crossed that line, and the further away from the other side that I got, where I really behaved myself and didn't rock the boat, um, I started to look back on my career with a whole other perspective. It's sort of a hindsight is 2020, no pun intended, but like, you look back and then you go, wow, like everything that happened in my career leading up to that moment made me to be the person that I needed to be in that moment. There was a lot of opportunities that I felt like maybe I had missed, um, over the years, that would have made me a different artist prior to this era of my career. But being independent is one of them, where I saw a lot of my friends get, record label contracts, and I chose to stay independent and not go that route. But there's certainly those days where you think, oh geez, did I miss the boat, because I had those meetings, I had that chance, should I have gone that route? But then, I'm so glad I'm independent, because it freed me up. I had nobody telling me what to do over the last 5 years. I was free to say whatever I wanted to say. I was making these music videos that were um, very detailed and intricate, with all these little, they were sort of an extension of the song. I wrote a song about Anthony Fauci called Sad Little Man, that had all these little details in it that, I couldn't have hired anybody to actually even do that, because it's so filled with detail. But I made a lot of videos like that, and I was able to fully express my artistic expression, 100%, with nothing tied to it. And I think that's why a lot of artists did end up holding back, especially in the mainstream entertainment arena. There's contracts, there's lawyers, there's, all sorts of voices and a machine behind these individuals. And what we got instead was a campaign, a coordinated campaign, where they weren't speaking out, they were joining this message. And so, sure enough, you saw them all within a couple of weeks span. Every single one of them was showing you, hey, look, I, went and got my shot. And it was coming from my industry. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is so clearly, an orchestrated thing. This isn't an organic movement. And so you pick up on these things. And again, that kind of stuff pushed me to speak, to continue leaning into it, and feeling I had to speak up and say something.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did. And then,
Mhm,
a lot of other people followed, and there were more and more musicians coming out,
mhm, mhm,
with songs about the situation and speaking up and things like that. So do
mhm,
you think that, the music industry is changing with did this, like, kind of kickstart something new? Because I think, it is sort of pretty cool phenomenon that I haven't seen this many people actually start making songs about this era either.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think that's one of the great silver linings that of the last, couple of years is, it wasn't just me. It was, all of a sudden I was meeting other artists I wouldn't have met before. And then we're collaborating, and they're writing songs that they've never written before. And then all of a sudden this new path is being carved into the mainstream, where um, you know, I think the general public's kind of getting tired of old Hollywood, and being lectured all the time on things that they don't really believe in. Um, and then you have real people. I'm just a dad that cared about his kids, that needed to say something. And so you have these, indie guys that aren't tethered to the system, that start saying something. It becomes um, part of the public conversation. You have, that ability to give people a tool to speak things that they can't find the right words to say. But it definitely has created a new path, and I think that's very exciting. One of the things that really woke me up to the power of what we can do together is when I released my album Silent War, which was a compilation of all these protest songs that I was making. It did really well on Amazon and iTunes charts, and it was up there for a little bit, right next to Bruce Springsteen and Taylor Swift. So, I'm just a guy that made an album at home in his bedroom that spent $0 on marketing. All of a sudden, through that grassroots organic support, is up there with these mainstream big machine artists. And, that was incredible to see, because it really showed you the power that we have in our hands as a collective, to speak with our dollars, speak with our mind, vote for our values, and we can really start to change things that way. And I think that that's where we're heading for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do feel that there are so many more people out there than we may think, that maybe don't talk about it, but they do have. I mean, even talking just to people here, I live in the countryside, and I can when I start talking to them about different topics, they actually do agree, and they're more aware than people could think. Maybe they just, don't dare to speak up at this point, but there's so many more. And when you see, like, that some of these songs that have come out just, completely hit #1 on iTunes, then you also know, like, that there's not a small group of us. There's like a
Mm-hmm.
much bigger group. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking about that, I was also thinking, about the recent elections, and, US, and I would say the whole world right now is divided. And this division is so huge and so clear that, most of us have not seen such a, thing playing out in our lifetime. Um, yeah, and I'm curious to know, because I do know that even on your Twitter, I follow you on Twitter, so I know that you speak a lot, especially politically, which is great, because I think, you should use your voice to say what you think. But this division, where is it coming from? Like, what do you see
Mm-hmm.
for the future? Like, what would you like people to say to people about this? Because I think it's terrible that you just judge a person based on, which side of the war they're on, or, like, which party they belong to, and
Mm-hmm.
if they are vaccinated or not. I mean, this is such a huge split, and it's such
Mm-hmm.
so shocking. I did read political psychology when I did my political science course in the university, and I so clearly remember, the war in Rwanda, where, the propaganda campaign could actually make people that were neighbors for their whole lives kill each other suddenly with machetes in
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of thousands within, like, I mean, it was just, and how, how incredibly powerful, just the media and the propaganda is, around us. And now with this division, you also see, like, um, who listens to what. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a
Yeah.
huge question, and we can narrow it down, or just, like, go into it. But,
Mm-hmm.
how can we solve this? What do you see for the future? What would
Mm-hmm.
you like to say to people about that?
Yeah. Gosh, there's a lot of layers to that. I think, yeah, that I think social media is a huge part of it. It's truncated our expression, down to a few lines, and so we have this natural tendency to read too much into it because there's not much really there. There's no voice. You can't read it. You're reading it in your own voice. So, we get triggered really easily by just reading something somebody else posted or something like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the media. And I think what has happened over the course of decades is a spiraling of corruption and lies and out of control, um, figures that behind the scenes, people we don't really even see, but then it funnels its way to the surface through our TV screen or through our phone, where it's really messed things up. But they're so deep into this lie and this swirl of manipulation that it's divided us, right? And so I think COVID brought a lot of that out. It really told us who we are. I was talking about this recently, on another podcast, but I think that the COVID era really brought out where we are at collectively as in humanity's psyche, and it was alarming. And I think more people have woken up to that over the last several years than have stayed asleep to it. I think there's so much happening in the world now that the average person can't really ignore it anymore. They even if you're just sort of the average person that wakes up, goes to work, just trying to feed the kids and pay the bills, but you don't really pay too much attention to the news, maybe, or you don't like to talk politics. I think even that kind of person is waking up to the idea that something feels off here. And I think that we have to get back to more of these kind of conversations, more in-depth conversations. I think that's one of the reasons that somebody like Joe Rogan is so popular, is because he has these long-form conversations with people that might not agree with him, and we don't see that much these days
Yeah.
because on a one-to-one level, And when we are, really, if you look at, we have to remember that what we're seeing through the screen isn't, it's a fabrication, and it's how we interpret it. But the real world is right here. It's the relationships you have with your neighbors, in your communities, and all these really terrible things that we say to each other online aren't things really that we would say to each other in person, and we have to remember that. And that was something that was really shocking about the music industry, throughout that time, where artists were segregating their fans based on their shot status. And so, to me, I'm sitting there going like, geez, you have to get a shot to go to a concert now. And I'm like, that's the one place where we're not supposed to be divided. That's where we're all supposed to come together, unite through good vibes, and sing along together. And it doesn't matter what you believe in politically. And then all of a sudden, even that was taken away from us. And so, um, yeah, we have to stay grounded. That's something that I've always tried to maintain. Even, the further down certain rabbit holes you get, it's easy to get
Mm.
sucked into some very dark places, and to start assuming things, and to make the world out to be this terrible place. But I did a lot of, prior to even COVID, a lot of meditations, and focusing on simple things in life. Even just think, and this might sound silly and to some people, but even just focusing on the miracle of a blade of grass was a fascinating uh, thing to sit there and think on, because it really puts a lot in perspective for you, and how what we have around us is actually the beauty of the world. It's actually the realness of the world, and that a lot is happening that's out here. This is what's happening, not what's up here all the time, but what's out there is what's real. And so we just have to learn to focus that. I think humanity's kind of slowly waking up to that right now. We're still in the early phases of that, but I think we're heading towards finally sort of the right path down. We'll see where we end up. I think it's going to take a generation or so to really get there, to teach our kids to properly, um, to just properly perceive the world around them. My generation, as an 80s and 90s kid, we were inundated with pop culture and junk food, and I think that distorted our perception of what's important, and what to expect out of life. And so my generation has grown up now, and once you have kids, you go, why do I want to feed them that, and why do I want to show them that? Like, that really wasn't that good for me. And so we're starting to change these things, and then it comes back around to entertainment and food, and having a healthy mindset, and having a connection spiritually to God. I think is the number one thing that we've let go of. I think that's the most obvious thing, really, is when you look at how the further detached we've become from God, the worse things have gotten. And then, how do we fix it? Well, reconnect with God. It's worked in my life. It's worked in many people's lives. And if you're open to that, I think you'll see differences in your life immediately. And then it'll just ricochet across the world.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think, no matter what religion, what kind of, perception you have of God and the spiritual part, it's which doesn't matter, but it's that like individual relationship with God, that I think everyone is able to create and not go through someone else, because I am a little bit like sensitive to gurus and this and that. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
religions obviously that used, control to like control people. So, but it's
Hmm.
like, everyone has access to that. And I remember as a
Hmm.
kid, I did always say like my parents, they always dragged me to church. And
Hmm.
I was so bored there, like kids, you sit there like for an hour and it's like a boring priest speaking. And I was
Hmm.
asking my mom, why do I need to come here? Like I can talk to
Hmm.
God wherever I want to. Like, do I have to go
Hmm.
to church? And I
Hmm.
think, and then the other thing is I think we need to go back to this concept of that we all have our differences. There's never going to be like a situation where you and I agree on everything. We might agree even in
Hmm.
a best case scenario on 90% of the stuff we talk about.
Hmm.
There's that one thing that puts us immediately in conflict. It's almost like, I
Hmm.
cancel you, Brad, because you don't
Hmm.
agree with me on this big thing. And I think we need
Right.
to go back to like humanity, right? Like it's
Hmm.
okay to disagree. It's amazing
Yeah.
to be able to have like heartfelt conversations with people, even if you belong to different parties or you have, wherever, whatever your background is, to just like
Hmm.
have these, like you said, you mentioned it, have these type of conversations again, the human conversations, because
Hmm.
me, it's a huge phenomenon, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on this. But how is it that some people, probably half of the people on our earth today, will still watch TV and they will watch the news and they will read the newspapers and they don't do their own research and they just believe everything that they hear from there. And then we have that other group that is completely the opposite. They will check every resource, they will do, both sides
Hmm.
of the coin, and they will really find out the truth. What do you
Hmm.
that come from?
Yeah, it's interesting where we've gotten to. I think like that's what makes life interesting. I don't want everybody to think exactly like I do. In fact, you want to embrace that those differences, because that's how you grow and change. And um I've met so many individuals over the last couple of years where a consistent thread throughout all of it is that they have a family member or a long-term friend that has ousted them from their life over such meaningless stuff. And it's happened in my life. It's happened in so many other people's lives, but where somebody important in your life has taken one thing and completely, closed the door on you. And that was something that was eye-opening to me. Was when I released that first song, God Help Us All, and all of a sudden I had these fans that had been following my music for, you know like I said, 2 decades, that should really know where my heart is, really know what I'm about, have some context around what I'm speaking of. And if they don't understand, ask a question, right? Say, I can't believe you said that. Why did you say that? But instead, what I got were just instant knee-jerk reactions of closing the door, angry, saying, I'm never going to listen to you again. And that was shocking to me, because I did expect a little bit of a back and forth, at least. Like, I know I'm going to upset some people. I've got to get this off my chest, because that's how I always listen to music. I don't agree with every single thing, every actor in every movie I've watched, or every musician that, writes a song that I enjoy. I don't agree with them on every little thing. There's no way that that's possible. Um, but we need to get back to that. That's kind of the way the world used to work. And we've just been on this sliding scale over the last decade or so, where it's gotten worse and worse, where it only takes one thing. It only and you can size them up, and you can say, oh, I know exactly, where you are on X, Y, and Z, because of, you know where you stand here on this situation. And yeah, we just have to have more conversations, I think, and get back to that, and not close the door so quickly. Remember that it's there's a soul behind there somewhere, and we need to reconnect our souls to one another. I think that's how humanity grows and prospers, because we're all capable of great, wonderful things. We're all capable of creating goodness in the world, and we're stunting that growth right now by dividing ourselves up over such meaningless, you know, jargon that doesn't mean anything. Oh, you voted for Joe Biden. Well, I'm never going to talk to you again. Or, oh, you voted for Donald Trump. Well, you can't come into my restaurant anymore, or whatever it may be. These are the dumb conversations that we're having now, that are preventing us from, you know, uh, come on into my restaurant. Let me feed you my food. Oh, your food's so great. I'm going to tell my friends that, like, you're creating something there, right? That
Yeah.
didn't exist before. And we're cutting ourselves off from that kind of growth. And it's sad to see, but again, it's kind of like exclusive to online, unless we see um certain riots or rallies that kind of seem um, orchestrated. And I think everybody can kind of pick up on the fact that certain rallies have been orchestrated. Now, the rallies that I've been to over the last several years have been the most unifying experiences of my life. And you find that, all these people that were painted a certain way in the media or labeled dangerous or misinformation spreaders were just very good people, and they came from all different backgrounds. That was a very eye-opening thing to me, was to travel the world and go to all these different events, not just in the United States, but we met in Austria. And
Yeah.
you know you're having these conversations with people that you've never met, but there's a connection there, and you're talking like you've known each other your whole life. And that's what we have to get back to. Even you set aside your differences and you do find the common ground, and then all of a sudden you've created an energy that wasn't there before. And all of those events, every single rally that I've attended over the last 4 years, has been a beautiful and positive experience filled with a whole diverse group of people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I actually have a confession to make, which is that the first time from one, when it was in my past life, but I was still working for the UN. And I remember, I mean, I was on that other side. I was so pissed off that I didn't want to. I was the person that was like, if you voted for Trump, we cannot be friends anymore, And
Hmm. Hmm.
so it's funny, like, how I've even been there and I've even done that to some
Hmm.
people. Then,
Hmm.
I end up here later and I'm trying to figure out like what happened there. Like, why did I do what I did? And now I understand why other people do it too, because and it was an argument like you have to be a complete moron if you vote for him. Like, you cannot be
Hmm.
a smart person, basically. And that's the argument I hear on social media now everywhere about, everyone who voted for him at this time. And now, of course, I have people on both sides, and I will not judge. I learned this the hard way, but I won't judge anyone because, again, like if we're gonna change something, we have to understand. We have to come together. We have to
Hmm.
inspire each other to change, not like force it on each other or call each other out or this hate that comes from all these people. It doesn't matter. Like there's brilliant people on both sides. It's just, about their story. I've even spoken to people, on my shows and everywhere that have had injured kids, by pharmaceuticals, or some that had to take because they were afraid that their kids that, had severe injuries or what do you call it? No, chronic diseases, and the
Hmm.
fear of a parent. But I understand it. I won't tell anyone what to do. I think, for me, the
Hmm.
most important thing today is that we all come to a place where everyone is able to decide what they want for their families and to decide over their own body, the bodily autonomy, which is also
Hmm.
an interesting conversation because, we're talking about that, but then we have one party that's even against, abortion. And for me, again, like, either we choose or we don't, like, because
Hmm.
it's still our bodies and I feel like you, it's your own choice, and you will have to bear the consequences, of everything that you do and take responsibility for your actions. I still don't want a government to tell me what I can and cannot do, you know
Hmm.
even if I'm for or
Yeah.
against, it doesn't matter in the end. But it's just that thing, like, what do we want? We can't want freedom here but no freedom here, like it kind of has to
Hmm.
be the same kind of rules for everything, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that the best that we can do is, if you're passionate about something and you really believe in something, um, you're welcome to say. I think what I've noticed is that a lot of people have lost their ability to communicate and how you say what it is that you're passionate about. You have to understand that you're not going to change somebody's mind with a tweet. But you may change somebody's mind with 1,000 tweets after a really long time, but really they're breadcrumbs of information that have to sit within them to consider over a period of time. But they themselves will come to that conclusion on their own if they do, but that's how it works. And so, but you can't cut them off if they're not getting it that quickly. I do hold a lot of people in the mainstream media accountable for certain information, but I feel like they had a much more important responsibility with their platform over the last few years, where I am pretty hard on certain public figures and saying like, well, where do you stand now if you're going to change your mind, or who do you or are you going to apologize for your actions? But to me, that's supposed to be the start of a conversation. That if you're going to be very hard on a certain group of people over here. Pierce Morgan is a prime example of a person who has a gigantic reach of people, and he really demonized the unvaccinated throughout COVID and said some very terrible things. And rather than coming to terms with that and making an honest and sincere apology, um, he sort of just slowly flipped his script and how he worded things. And I reached out, I'm on X and I'm like, hey, Pierce Morgan, are you going to apologize for what you said now that you've changed your mind? And what he ended up doing was blocking me. And so to me, that tells me, okay, like the conversation's not to be had, then your sincerity is not to be had. And so, that's what I'm always trying to pull out of people is a certain conversation to have. And I do hold people with large platforms on a different tier, but I think our one-to-one personal relationships that we have with family, friends, people in the workplace, and that's really where it matters the most, which makes us stronger. I think that we have to be very, um, uh, I don't know if strategic is the right word about it, but just conscious and empathetic and try to understand where they're coming from more and be open to just hearing and listening and uh, considering their side of things and then responding in a certain way that you hope doesn't upset them or trigger them in return because the energy is both there. It's kind of like two magnets trying to get to one another, but it keeps pushing them apart. So that's the friction right now in society. But I think that, like I said earlier, I think little by little, especially now with the energy in America is, I feel like, has shifted now that we do have a new administration and people were tired of the old administration. And whether or not you stand behind Trump or you don't, I think that there's a recognition that you can sort of say certain things now and it's okay, and there's a weight that's lifted off of this tenseness that was created from the last administration. But see, again, I think it's never going to really change from the top
No.
coming down. It's only going to change, you know, in our own communities, and that is how we get stronger and work together. There's plenty of neighbors I have where I know that we don't agree on everything politically, but we're good to each other and it makes us feel safe in where we're at, and we watch out for one another, and we trust each other with our kids and letting them grow up together. And we know that sometimes our disagreements don't even have to be a conversation at all.
Yeah.
That's that's something else that we've become accustomed to, is we have to say our opinion about everything, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be there at all. So
No, I agree. And I feel like, politics are difficult. I mean, I worked in politics. I worked for the UN. My major is in political science. So to be honest, like I don't even, it's not something I trust in. It's not something, one is maybe better here, but worse there. And at the end of the day, you're right. Like it comes to us, the people, the communities we build, and it is good to, like you do when you hold people accountable, especially public figures, because it's not about attacking them, but more like having an open conversation, a transparent dialogue about issues that concern a lot of people in this world. And it seems like we're not able to have those anymore without being censored or not being able to speak. And to me, it's not a democracy. It's not following anything. If anything, I always, even with my past work at the UN, like one thing that I will always advocate for is, there was something set into place, which is the Declaration of Human Rights, and there's a lot of really good things there too that we can lean against and bring up when things are not being, dealt with in a just way. But the world is a mess right now, and I don't think I've ever seen us in politics. I think, that needs a total reform because I don't think many people trust politicians today. You know,
hmm
we
yeah.
need more people that are like, grassroots people that, are experts in different areas that, start new, it has to be new, and
hmm
I
yeah.
agree with you, that the community is the most important.
hmm Yeah, it's become it's like a sports team, that's basically the way politics is become. It's a football match of, this team versus that team. If, in my opinion, whether you like Robert Kennedy Jr. or not, in my opinion, like if we collectively had our heads on our shoulders, I feel like um, that would have been the best choice to end the division, right? You,
Yeah.
if he had been the winner, you would have had two sides instantaneously both go, oh, like where do we go from here? There's nothing to fight about anymore. He would have broken that up.
Yeah,
It would
I
have been
agree with you.
fragmented. Yeah, and so, yeah, we see a lot of that. But see, again, like look at a figure like Justin Trudeau, where he had his citizens come to his doorstep, with their convoy. And instead of talking to them, he ran away. And
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that triggers the division from the top down, because those that sided with Trudeau, saw him distance himself from those people. And so there was no conversation to be had. So those in the trucker convoy were still looked at as one way, and those that sided with, Trudeau's government still looked at it that way. And these are the things that, you know, that's the power from the top down perspective. And that's why it needs to change. That's something I really loved about um, the last several years of my life, is connecting with people who really get that, and knowing that there's a community from the bottom up that you can build, that's strong and resilient and can take on anything. And it really, it gives you confidence in yourself. That energy feeds off of one another. Me speaking out made somebody else stronger, and them speaking out made somebody else stronger, and it all reciprocates and comes back. And then I see, wow, people are, collectively getting stronger, and then I'm stronger again, and it continuously, it feeds it and it builds it and builds it and builds it. And I think we'll see that, more with as technology takes hold, artificial intelligence and people's perspective of what's true and what's not true. People are going to be forced into a position of of being in real situations again, just so they know in their brain that's real. I saw it right here. I had that conversation,
Yeah.
because so much in our society is going to be twisted, and very soon it's already happening, obviously. But the more AI becomes smarter and takes a hold, people are going to be forced to question whether what they're seeing is real or not. If they're not in that camp yet, they will be. And I think that that's one reason why you're seeing an uprising in people wanting to own their land and grow their own food and teach their own kids again. We're having this sort of um, uh, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, just a small little revolution of people trying to
Yeah.
get back to reality. And I think that that's going to grow more and more. You're going to see half of the people go towards technology and AI, and then the other half of people are going to reconnect with their roots and what's real, and with what's organic and true, and they'll. I think that there's a middle ground there where you can use technology to benefit what's real and true, but we're not smart enough to handle it. That's my opinion.
I, and the crazy part is that literally what you just said, I've had this conversation with at least like 4 people in the last 2 days about, that division and 50% going there and 50 going here,
Yeah.
building of the old. And it's really true. Like I'm exactly on the same page as you. And that's we will have to have another interview just for that topic because it's so huge. But it's a very interesting topic and very interesting, stuff coming up in our very near future. And I think this year will be, very symbolic for just that. And I know we're time is running out or running from us, but I do wanna, as a last question, ask you. So, being this the beginning of the year, and not only what you see for this year, but also like what you wish for this year, what you want to say to the listeners, something that can inspire others to go out there and do positive things and support each other.
Yeah, I hope this year, um, I just hope we do better this year. I just hope that we can leave a lot of that baggage from the last 4 years can be set aside on a personal level. I think, there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered about the last several years that I don't want to be left behind. But I think that those questions won't really get answered until we start coming together and opening our hearts and minds to one another. I think that, each day find a situation where you can, um, you know, get yourself to do something that you wouldn't have considered doing yesterday, and just to stretch your heart and mind a little bit, and it makes you function better. I do that a lot. Just your time is your currency here. That is the most valuable currency you have. So to donate your time to somebody, to speak to them, to give them your time, I think that's a very valuable thing. And to find somebody, especially that you might disagree with, and sit there, and even if you're sitting there cringing in your mind about what they're saying, find a moment to be patient with them and listen, and do your best to connect with them, because you might not change their mind in that moment, but if I think that if you can find patience, and you can sit with them and respond in a collected manner with your head on straight, then long term that will affect them when they look back on those kind of conversations. Go, they seemed a lot more rational than I gave them credit for, and I think slowly, little by little, we'll be stitching back together, all the division that has been sown over the last, you know decade or so. I think that we're at the beginning phases of all that being patched back together, and I think we're just getting tired of it. I think a lot of people are just tired of being angry all the time, and that where else can you go but just end up, you know being normal to one another again. So I hope for that in the coming year, and in a year from now, we'll all be able to just go, that was crazy, but at least we caught the bad guys. That's my hope. We all come together and just catch the real bad guys.
Yeah, for people to realize that they were actually, like actually justice being
Hmm.
them being brought to justice. And I want to also end with like something beautiful that you mentioned before that I also really truly believe is that you know, to be present with your family and like really enjoy your time, you know, and be there and be
Hmm.
happy, you know, because that time,
Yeah.
and we have kids growing up now, that time we will never get that back. So you said that and it really stuck in my mind because, you know, it is
Mhm.
such an important thing too. You know, we worked so much these past 4 years and traveling everywhere and it was a lot, but you know, coming back to ourselves, you know, and our close ones and enjoying that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what matters most. At the end of the day, like I know that in my own little world, if my wife still loves me, if my kids are happy and love me, like that's all I really need. And if you can soak that in and make the most of your time together each and every day, um, your life's going to be exponentially better, and it will have an impact, I think, on those around you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, thanks so much for this conversation. It was really amazing, and I feel inspired now talking to you. So I hope the
Thank
listeners
you.
will too. And I also just wanted to ask you where people can find you and your music and follow your amazing creativity.
Sure. So you can check out fivetimesAugust.com, Five. It's all spelled out, fivetimesAugust.com. There's CDs and records for sale on the website. And you can find the music on Amazon and Spotify and iTunes in the digital world. And you can follow me on Facebook and X and all those other platforms just at Five Times August. So, yeah. Thanks for having me today. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Brad.